In the serene embrace of the Blue Ridge Mountains, a sense of tranquility pervades the air. Yet, beneath the calm exterior, lies a mystery that has haunted these hills for over a decade. On a crisp autumn morning, hikers stumbled upon an abandoned cabin, long forgotten by time. Inside they found something that would unravel a web of secrets, hidden for 12 long years. Our story begins with a mother and son, Clara and Ethan Caldwell, whose lives were woven into the very fabric of this community. Clara, a dedicated nurse at the local hospital, was known for her warmth and unwavering kindness. She had a gentle smile that could soothe the most troubled soul. Her son, Ethan, was an adventurous spirit, a bright-eyed 10-year-old with an insatiable curiosity for the world around him. Together, they were a beloved pair in their small town. Life in the Blue Ridge was simple, but for Clara it was perfect. Every weekend she would take Ethan on hikes through the trails that snaked through the mountains. It was their sacred ritual, a time for stories and laughter, away from the hustle of everyday life. But on one fateful day in late October, everything changed. The morning of their disappearance was like any other. The sun had barely risen when Clara and Ethan set out for their hike. Clara waved goodbye to her neighbor, a routine gesture that would soon take on a haunting significance. As the hours passed and the sun began its descent, concern began to ripple through the town. Clara and Ethan had not returned. The initial response was one of disbelief. Clara was responsible, meticulous to a fault. Her failure to return was unfathomable. As dusk fell, worry turned to panic. Friends and family gathered, their voices hushed with fear as they retraced the familiar paths, calling out for any sign of the missing pair. The search continued through the night, flashlights flickering like fireflies against the darkened forest. The forest seemed to swallow every cry, every plea, offering no trace of the mother and son. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. As dawn broke, the grim reality set in. The authorities were called, and the investigation began. But what could they find in a place so vast, where secrets were as plentiful as the leaves that carpeted the forest floor? 12 years later, the discovery in the cabin would reignite the case, but on that day, all that stood was the unanswered question, echoing through the mountains: where were Clara and Ethan Caldwell? The first 911 call came in, breaking the morning silence. It was a voice filled with disbelief and urgency, setting off a chain of events that would forever change the lives of those in the Blue Ridge. The operator's voice came through the line, calm and steady, as the voice on the other end struggled to form words. The caller was Clara's neighbor, the same one who had waved goodbye that fateful morning. Her voice trembled as she recounted the day's events, her mind racing over what she might have missed, what she could have done differently. "They never came back," she repeated, her words laced with an urgency that demanded action. "It's been over 24 hours. This isn't like her." The dispatcher assured her that help was on the way, but even as she hung up, there was a sense of foreboding in the air, a chilling premonition that this was only the beginning. As search teams assembled, a portrait of Clara Caldwell began to emerge. She was a single mother, fiercely devoted to her son. Ethan, a bright and curious 8-year-old, was the center of her world. Clara worked tirelessly as a nurse, often picking up extra shifts to make ends meet, yet she always found time for Ethan. Their hikes were a cherished escape, a chance to explore the world together. The trail they had chosen that morning was one they'd walked countless times before. It was a path that wound through the heart of the Blue Ridge, offering breathtaking views and the promise of adventure. But now it seemed to hold only secrets, silent and unyielding. As search teams fanned out, the community rallied. Volunteers poured in, their faces etched with determination. They combed the forest, calling out, their voices echoing into the vastness. They followed every lead, every whisper of a clue, but each search ended in frustration. The police worked tirelessly, piecing together the timeline of that day. Witnesses were interviewed, every detail scrutinized. A hiker had seen them at the trailhead. Another had passed them on the path. But then nothing. It was as if the forest had swallowed them whole, leaving behind only a trail of unanswered questions. The investigation stumbled from the start. With no signs of foul play, the search was complicated by the sheer size and density of the forest. Theories emerged, each more chilling than the last. Had they been attacked by wildlife? Had they simply lost their way in the tangled underbrush? Or was there something more sinister at play? Days stretched into weeks, and hope began to wane. The community clung to the belief that Clara and Ethan would return, that they would emerge from the forest with stories to tell. But as winter set in, the search was called off, the case filed away as a tragic mystery. Yet the mountain held its secrets close, waiting for the day when they would be revealed. And as the years passed, the story of Clara and Ethan Caldwell became a haunting legend, a tale whispered with reverence and fear. 12 years later, the hikers who stumbled upon the abandoned cabin would uncover the truth. But for now, the forest lay silent, the question hanging in the air, unanswered and haunting. Where were Clara and Ethan Caldwell? In the chaotic aftermath of Clara and Ethan Caldwell's disappearance, the clock started ticking. The first 48 hours would be crucial, yet fraught with missteps and missed opportunities. The town of Blue Ridge buzzed with urgency. Sheriff Tomlinson, a man known for his steady demeanor, found himself navigating a media storm that descended on the small community. Reporters lined the streets, cameras clicking, capturing the faces of a town gripped by fear and confusion. The pressure was immense. Within hours of the report, a command center was set up at the edge of the forest. Maps spread across tables and radios crackled with updates. Yet, amidst the chaos, critical errors began to unfold. Leads were mismanaged, and the sheer volume of information overwhelmed the small-town police force. Key witnesses were interviewed in haste. The hiker who had seen Clara and Ethan at the trailhead described them as cheerful, but his account was skimmed over, lost in a sea of statements. Another witness, a park ranger, mentioned seeing a suspicious figure lurking near the trail entrance days before the disappearance, but this was dismissed as unrelated. Inside the Caldwell home, the atmosphere was thick with despair. Clara's sister Margaret clutched a family photo, her face pale and drawn. She tried to provide the police with details about Clara's routine, her friends, and any possible enemies, but her words seemed to fall into a void. Ethan's father, John, was a man of few words, but his eyes spoke volumes. He stood by helplessly, entrusting the investigation to those who seemed to be floundering. His frustration simmered beneath the surface, a storm waiting to break. Back in the forest, search teams trudged through the undergrowth, their efforts hampered by the sprawling wilderness. As night fell, a cold, biting wind swept through the trees, and the forest became an impenetrable wall of darkness. In those early hours, a crucial piece of evidence was overlooked. Near the trailhead, a discarded backpack lay half buried under leaves. It was a small, seemingly insignificant detail, but it would later prove pivotal. Yet in the rush of activity it went unnoticed, trampled by the feet of countless searchers. As dawn broke on the second day, the sense of urgency intensified. Theories flew wildly. Some suggested the pair had simply vanished into the wilderness, but whispers of foul play began to circulate. A reporter from a national outlet posed the question that lingered on everyone's lips. Could someone have taken them? With each passing hour, the task grew more daunting. The forest, vast and unyielding, seemed to mock their efforts. The police, struggling under the weight of expectation, began to feel the strain. But in the shadows, a presence lurked, watching with keen interest. The truth lay hidden, woven into the fabric of the forest, waiting for the right moment to emerge. As the sun dipped below the horizon once more, the mystery deepened, leaving behind a trail of doubts and missed chances. And the question hung heavier than ever. What really happened to Clara and Ethan Caldwell? The morning air was crisp, biting at the cheeks of the officers gathered at the makeshift command post. Inside the tent, a cacophony of voices and the persistent crackle of radios filled the space. Detective Marshall, seasoned but weary, stood at the center, maps of the Blue Ridge spread out before him. His eyes, bloodshot and tired, scanned the charts for any clue they might have missed. A young officer approached, his expression a mix of eagerness and trepidation. He had been tasked with combing through witness statements, and his notepad was filled with hurried scribbles. There was a hiker, a woman in her mid-40s who claimed to have seen a man near the trailhead around the time of the disappearance. Her description was vague, tall, wearing a dark jacket, but something about her demeanor suggested she was holding back. Perhaps fear or uncertainty clouded her memory. Detective Marshall turned his attention to the witness. "Could you tell us more about that man you saw? Anything unusual?" The woman hesitated, eyes darting to the ground. I don't know. He just seemed out of place, like he was watching but not really part of the scene." Marshall nodded, jotting down her words. It wasn't much, but any lead was a lifeline. Back at the Caldwell residence, the atmosphere was tense. Reporters had begun to gather, their presence an unwelcome reminder of the scrutiny the family faced. Clara's mother clung to hope, her eyes scanning the driveway for a car that wouldn't return. John's frustration simmered, his trust in the authorities waning with each passing hour. In an attempt to regain some control, John had organized a search party of his own. Friends and neighbors volunteered, armed with flashlights and determination. They moved in a line through the woods, calling out names that echoed hauntingly through the silence. Meanwhile, the police continued their efforts, but cracks had begun to show. A miscommunication led a team to search an area already covered the previous day, wasting precious time. The backpack, still unnoticed, lay beneath the leaves, its contents a silent testament to its owner. As the clock ticked, news of the disappearance spread, drawing attention from media outlets far and wide. Theories flourished, each more sensational than the last. Some speculated about a serial abductor, others whispered of revenge for some unknown slight from Clara's past. Detective Marshall, aware of the mounting pressure, convened a meeting with his team. They needed a breakthrough, something to cut through the noise and point them in the right direction. "We need to go back to the beginning, retrace every step, re-interview every witness. There's something we're missing." The team's resolve hardened and they dispersed, each driven by the hope that the next clue was within their grasp. But the forest, with its ancient secrets, remained unmoved. It held its breath, the truth buried deep within its heart. As night descended once more, the hope of immediate resolution faded. But within the darkness, a thread of light remained. A presence, hidden and watchful, waited for the moment when everything would finally come to light. The first 48 hours in any disappearance are critical, and for the small town nestled near the Blue Ridge, the urgency was palpable. The community had rarely seen such a mobilization, and yet beneath the surface, the chaos was beginning to unravel a case that would haunt them for over a decade. Detective Marshall stood before a map splayed across the hood of a patrol car, the lines and markings now a tangled web of confusion. The officers, though attentive, were weary. Missteps had already been made, and those crucial early hours were slipping away. "We need eyes on the roads leading out of the area," Marshall insisted. Checkpoints should have been established, but resources were thin and coordination was lacking. The state police offered assistance, but jurisdictional frictions slowed their involvement. The Caldwell's neighbors, the Whitmans, were the first to be re-interviewed. They recalled seeing Clara's car leave the driveway the morning of the disappearance, but hesitated when pressed about the driver. It all happened so fast, and from a distance they couldn't be sure. Across town, Clara's sister Elaine was pacing, phone in hand, desperately calling anyone who might know something. Her voice trembled as she spoke to Detective Marshall. "My sister wouldn't just leave. She'd never take Josh without a word." Elaine's frustration mirrored John's. They felt sidelined by the authorities, their pleas for action meeting procedural roadblocks. A missing person case, particularly with no immediate signs of foul play, often sits in the grey area of urgency. Back at the station, a young officer named Carter sifted through the growing mountain of tips. A call came in from a local hiker, claiming to have seen a woman and child fitting Clara and Josh's description near an old trailhead. Carter noted it, but was unsure of its priority amid the chaos. Meanwhile, the search continued, yet organization faltered. Volunteers wandered, their enthusiasm tempered by exhaustion and the growing realization that they were untrained for such an operation. A local hunter's suggestion to use dogs was initially ignored, a decision that would later be scrutinized. The media frenzy escalated. Reporters camped outside the police station, eager for any scrap of information. They cornered Detective Marshall as he exited the building, cameras capturing his strained expression. "Do you have any leads? Do you believe they're still alive?" Marshall, maintaining a facade of calm, reiterated their commitment to the case, but offered little in the way of new information. His words, though measured, did little to quell the growing anxiety. Within the forest, the search party stumbled upon an abandoned campsite. Freshly used, it was a rare glimmer of hope, but the elation was short-lived. It belonged to a group of college students on a weekend retreat, unrelated to the case. As the sun dipped below the horizon again, a somber mood settled over the community. Families returned to their homes, their hearts heavy with the weight of uncertainty. The forest resumed its vigil, the whispers of its secrets lost in the rustle of leaves. But there was one who remained. A figure stepped quietly through the underbrush, drawn to a spot just beyond the reach of the searchlights. There, nestled among the roots, lay the backpack. Inside, the contents bore silent witness to a journey interrupted. The realization of the oversight would come too late. The trail, once warm, now grew colder with each passing night. Yet in the heart of that darkness, a flicker of determination ignited. Somewhere the answer waited, biding its time until the moment was right to emerge. In the dim light of early dawn, Detective Marshall sat at his desk, the events of the past few days swirling in his mind like a relentless storm. The discovery of the backpack, while initially promising, yielded little more than a collection of personal items, nothing that screamed for attention. Yet, in the absence of new leads, even the smallest detail demanded scrutiny. The community, once galvanized by hope, now found itself mired in speculation. Rumors spread like wildfire, each more outlandish than the last. Some whispered of a shadowy figure seen lurking near the elementary school weeks before the disappearance. Others pointed fingers at Drake, the reclusive handyman who lived on the outskirts of town, his eccentricities making him an easy target for suspicion. Drake, known for his solitary nature and penchant for midnight walks, soon found himself at the center of the town's gossip. His worn cabin, filled with scavenged treasures and forgotten relics, became the focus of the investigation's dwindling energy. Marshall, though skeptical, knew the importance of leaving no stone unturned. Drake, when questioned, was cooperative but guarded. His alibi, an evening spent at the local bar, verified by the bartender and a handful of regulars, failed to alleviate the community's suspicion. His odd behavior, a blend of nervous tics and evasive answers, only fueled the fire. Yet for every accusatory glance cast in Drake's direction, there was another aimed at the family. Whispers of hidden debts and troubled relationships began to surface, casting a pall over the seemingly perfect life of the missing mother and her son. A disgruntled former colleague emerged, speaking of heated arguments and veiled threats, painting a picture of desperation. Despite these burgeoning leads, none held the weight of evidence. The investigation, once a torrent of activity, slowed to a trickle, bogged down by conjecture and dead ends. Marshall, forced to navigate the murky waters of public opinion, felt the pressure mounting. In the quiet of his office, Marshall pondered the future of the case. Files littered his desk, each one a testament to a lead pursued, a theory explored. The once vibrant hope of an imminent resolution now faded, replaced by the grim reality of a case slipping into obscurity. Outside, the town continued its daily rhythm, the routine a balm against the encroaching uncertainty. Yet beneath the surface, a tension simmered, a silent acknowledgement that the answers they sought remained elusive. As the days turned to weeks, the search waned. Resources, stretched thin, were diverted to pressing matters elsewhere. The once fervent media attention dwindled, and the reporters who had crowded the station moved on to the next story. The case, it seemed, was destined to join the ranks of the unsolved, a haunting reminder of lives interrupted and mysteries left to languish in the shadows. But in the deep recesses of the forest, the truth lay dormant, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. And as the last of the searchers withdrew, a quiet resolve took root. For those who remained, the search was far from over. The answers, they knew, were out there, hidden in the whispers of the wind and the untold stories of the woods. As the dust settled on the initial frenzy of activity, the investigation found itself mired in uncertainty. Speculation ran rampant through the small Blue Ridge community, each whispered theory a thread in the tapestry of confusion. Marshall, the lead investigator, found himself at the center of a storm of rumor and conjecture. The townsfolk, once unified in their concern, now seemed to fracture into camps of suspicion. Drake, the missing woman's estranged brother, quickly became the focal point of many a hushed conversation. His aloof demeanor and history of strained relations with his sister painted him as an easy target. But Drake was not alone in the spotlight. An old friend of the family, a man who had been seen frequenting their home, fell under scrutiny. His presence, once a comforting familiarity, now cast in a sinister light. Theories abounded. Had he harbored unrequited feelings? Was there a financial motive hidden beneath their friendship? Marshall, navigating the minefield of community gossip, struggled to separate fact from fiction. Each new lead seemed to dissolve upon closer inspection, a mirage of truth that receded as quickly as it appeared. The once promising avenues of inquiry led only to dead ends, and the evidence, scant as it was, refused to yield its secrets. The local media, eager for a story, fueled the fire with sensational headlines and speculative pieces. The case, they suggested, was a tangled web of deceit and betrayal. Yet for all their fervor, the reporters offered little in the way of new information, their stories more smoke than substance. As the weeks stretched into months, the investigation lost its momentum. Resources dwindled, the once bustling command center quieted by the relentless march of time. Marshall, disheartened but undeterred, continued to sift through the fragments of the case, each day hoping for the breakthrough that eluded him. In the town, life carried on. The rhythms of daily existence resumed, a fragile normalcy masking the undercurrent of unresolved tension. Marshall felt the weight of their expectant gazes, the unspoken question hanging in the air. Would the truth ever come to light? Yet in the midst of the despair, a small glimmer of hope remained. For amid the shadows of the forest, the truth lingered, silent, patient, and waiting. And though the trail had gone cold, Marshall knew that somewhere, in the tangled underbrush of the Blue Ridge, the answers lay hidden, poised to emerge when least expected. As the seasons changed and the vibrant hues of Blue Ridge faded into the muted tones of winter, the case of the missing mother and son lingered in the minds and hearts of the community, like a ghost that refused to be laid to rest. Marshall, determined as ever, found himself at the crossroads of frustration and resolve. The silence of the forest seemed a cruel reminder of the elusiveness of truth. The community, once a source of support, had grown weary of the mystery. Whispers of doubt and suspicion echoed through the small town streets. Fingers pointed at every shadow, every unfamiliar face, and even those who had once been friends. Among the murmurs, one name began to surface more frequently. A reclusive neighbor who lived on the fringes of town, known more for his eccentricities than any malicious intent. He was an easy target for suspicion, a man who preferred the company of his books and his garden to that of people. Rumors spread like wildfire, fueled by the town's need for answers. Had he seen something? Had he done something? Marshall, despite his own doubts, knew he had to follow every lead, however tenuous. The neighbor, when approached, was cooperative yet bewildered by the scrutiny. His alibi, though solid, was tangled in the web of his solitary lifestyle. Yet no evidence pointed to his involvement. Just another dead end in a maze of uncertainty. As Marshall pored over the dwindling case files in his dimly lit office, the weight of the unsolved mystery bore down on him. Each page, each photograph, seemed to mock his efforts. The faces of the missing, captured in happier times, haunted him. He knew he was racing against time, the cold trail growing ever fainter. One evening, as the snow began to fall outside, Marshall found himself revisiting the scene of the disappearance. The forest was silent, save for the crunch of snow beneath his boots. It was here, amid the towering trees and the whispers of the wind, that he allowed himself a moment of reflection. Somewhere, buried beneath the layers of time and silence, lay the key to unraveling this enigma. But as the snow covered the tracks of the past, Marshall knew the investigation was faltering. Leads had dried up, and the community's interest had waned. Yet, in his heart, he held on to a flicker of hope. For he believed, with unwavering certainty, that the answers lay hidden, waiting to be uncovered. He would not give up and neither would the forest. Its secrets, though buried, were not forgotten, and Marshall vowed to keep searching, trusting that one day the truth would emerge from the shadows, bringing with it the justice long overdue. As he turned to leave, the snow began to fall more heavily, obscuring the path and the past. But Marshall knew that, like the seasons, the cycle of the investigation would continue, and with it, the promise that one day, perhaps sooner than he dared to hope, the answers would finally come to light. Years passed, and the weight of the unsolved case settled like a heavy fog over the hearts of those who had once been intimately entwined in its narrative. The Blue Ridge community, once galvanized by the mysterious disappearance of Emily and her young son, began to drift back into the rhythms of small-town life. New stories emerged, new children were born, and the collective memory of the vanished mother and son started to fade into the backdrop of local lore. For Emily's family, however, time did not heal. It only deepened the chasm of grief and uncertainty. Her parents, once vibrant and active members of the community, withdrew into themselves, their home a shrine to the daughter and grandson that had been taken from them. Each anniversary of their disappearance was a stark reminder of the void that could never be filled. Emily's sister Sarah took on the mantle of family investigator. She scoured every new lead, every whispered rumor, with a tenacity that bordered on obsession. Her dining room table became a war room, cluttered with maps, photographs, and notes, each piece a fragment of a puzzle she was determined to solve. But with every year that passed, the task grew more daunting. Friends and neighbors, once eager to help, began to move on. The case was old news, a cold whisper in a town eager for warmth and renewal. Yet Sarah, driven by love and the need for closure, could not let go. She reached out to private investigators, forensic experts, anyone who might breathe new life into the investigation. But money was tight, and each new effort seemed to lead back to the same brick walls that had stymied the initial police investigation. In the local police department, the case files gathered dust. Marshall, now retired, often revisited the case in his mind, haunted by the faces of Emily and the little boy who should have been playing in the schoolyard, not relegated to the pages of a forgotten file. He would call Sarah occasionally, offering words of encouragement and sharing any new ideas, no matter how far-fetched. But even his indomitable spirit felt the strain of time. Community events, once held in their honor, dwindled. Vigil candles remained unlit, and the annual charity run was replaced by newer causes. Emily and her son became ghosts, stories told to children around campfires, and their names whispered with a sense of resigned mystery. But Sarah refused to let their memory die. She wrote letters to newspapers, appeared on local radio shows, tirelessly keeping their story alive. She spoke to anyone who would listen, her voice a constant reminder that though the world had moved on, the pain of not knowing was an unyielding shadow. Then, one afternoon, as she sifted through old newspaper clippings, an article caught her eye. It was a piece about advancements in DNA technology and how cold cases were being reopened and solved with these new scientific breakthroughs. It ignited a spark of hope within her, a possibility that perhaps somewhere evidence lay waiting to be re-examined with fresh eyes and new tools. As she read, a determination took hold. She knew she needed to act, to push for these new technologies to be applied to her sister's case. It was a long shot, but it was a shot nonetheless. She picked up the phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she dialed a number she hadn't called in years. As it rang, she knew this could be the start of something new. Perhaps, just perhaps, the silence that had suffocated them for so long was about to be broken. As the phone rang, Sarah's mind raced through the possibilities. Would this be another dead end, another polite but dismissive conversation? Or could this finally be the break they so desperately needed? The voice on the other end was familiar, if only from past conversations steeped in despair and cautious hope. "Detective Harris," the voice answered, a touch of surprise in his tone. It had been years since their last conversation, but the case of Emily and her son was one he had never fully let go. Sarah quickly explained the article, the promise of new DNA technologies that could breathe life into old cases. Harris listened intently, his own curiosity piqued. "Sarah, "I'll look into it," he assured her, feeling the weight of his own past failures. "I can't promise anything, but if there's a way to re-examine the evidence, I'll find it." With that small glimmer of hope, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. She began to dig deeper into the world of forensic advancements, learning the language of DNA sequencing and genetic genealogy. The more she learned, the more she believed that science might hold the key to unlocking the mystery that had gripped her family for over a decade. Meanwhile, the town of Blue Ridge carried on, its residents absorbed in the rhythms of daily life. New families moved in, unaware of the ghosts that lingered in the community's memory. The local diner, once a hub of whispered theories and speculation, now buzzed with the mundane chatter of weather and weekend plans. For Sarah, every trip to town was a reminder of the void left by Emily and her son. She often visited their favorite spots, a small park where laughter had once echoed, the library where Emily volunteered, places now tinged with an aching silence. But beneath the surface of routine, a quiet determination simmered. Sarah joined online forums dedicated to solving cold cases, connecting with people who understood her plight. They shared stories of breakthroughs, of justice delivered years after hope had faded. Each story fueled her resolve, each success a beacon that perhaps one day she too would have answers. Detective Harris, true to his word, began to sift through the old evidence, reaching out to forensic experts who might be able to apply new techniques. It was slow work, filled with bureaucratic hurdles and the skepticism of colleagues who had long written off the case. Yet, as the years crawled by, a change was brewing. The relentless march of time had not dulled Sarah's resolve, rather it had sharpened it. Her persistence was infectious, and slowly interest in the case began to rekindle. Local news stations aired retrospective segments, and the community, once resigned, began to whisper again about the mother and son who vanished without a trace. Then, one crisp fall morning, Sarah received a call from Detective Harris. His voice carried a hint of excitement she hadn't heard before. "Sarah, I think we might have something. It's not much, but it's a lead. We need to meet." As she hung up, a mix of fear and hope coursed through her. Could this be the moment they had waited for? The years of silence, of unanswered questions and unyielding pain, felt like they might finally give way to the truth. And so, with a heart pounding in her chest, Sarah prepared to meet Harris, knowing that whatever came next, it was a step closer to the answers she had chased for so long. Sarah sat in her car outside the precinct, hands gripping the steering wheel as a mixture of hope and apprehension swirled within her. The air was crisp, the trees adorned in autumnal reds and golds, a stark contrast to the grey weight of uncertainty she carried. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever awaited inside. The office buzzed with the low hum of activity, but to Sarah it was all a blur until she saw Detective Harris approach. His expression was focused, determined, a far cry from the weary resignation she'd once seen. "We found something in the old case files," Harris began, his voice steady but tinged with urgency. An overlooked piece of evidence, a photograph from the day they vanished. It was taken by a tourist just minutes before Emily and Daniel were last seen. Sarah's pulse quickened as she leaned in, examining the grainy image Harris handed her. It was the familiar scene of the park, but there in the background a shadowy figure lurked near the old trailhead. It was indistinct, almost ghostly, but unmistakably a person. "This could be nothing," Harris cautioned, "but it could also be someone who saw what happened, or worse, someone involved." The years of silence had taught Sarah to temper hope with caution, yet she couldn't suppress the flicker of excitement. This was more than they'd had in years, a potential key to unlocking the mystery. As they delved deeper into the investigation, the community's interest was reignited. The local papers picked up the story, headlines speculating about the identity of the mysterious figure. Was it a witness, an accomplice? Questions buzzed through the town, weaving through coffee shop conversations and schoolyard gossip. For Sarah, the resurgence of attention was a double-edged sword. Each new theory and rumor stirred the painful memories of the day her life had been torn apart. Yet she couldn't deny the momentum building, the sense that they were on the cusp of something significant. In the following weeks, Harris and Sarah worked tirelessly, reaching out to experts who could enhance the photograph. hoping to pull more detail from its shadowy depths. It was a meticulous process, fraught with delays and setbacks, but gradually a clearer image emerged. Meanwhile, Sarah's private investigation gained traction. Her online community offered insights and shared similar stories of long-lost loved ones, providing both solace and motivation. She pored over records, piecing together fragments of the past, driven by the belief that the truth was within reach. The days turned into weeks, and still, the photograph yielded no definitive answers. The figure remained unidentified, an enigma shrouded in speculation. Yet each small breakthrough, each new piece of information, brought them one step closer. Then one evening, as Sarah sat surrounded by files and photographs, her phone buzzed with a message from Harris. "We need to talk. There's been a development." Her heart raced. She knew this could be another dead end, another moment of hope dashed against the rocks of reality. But she also knew she couldn't stop now, not when the truth felt so tantalizingly close. With resolve, she gathered her notes and headed out, determined to face whatever awaited her. The long silence was beginning to crack, and through the fissures, the light of truth beckoned. Sarah's car wound its way through the winding roads of the Blue Ridge Mountains, the setting sun casting long shadows across the landscape. Her mind raced, filled with the possibilities that Harris's message implied. As she pulled into the gravel driveway of the small cabin that had become their makeshift headquarters, she could feel the anticipation in the air. Inside, Harris sat at the kitchen table, his laptop open and a stack of papers beside him. The air was heavy with unspoken thoughts, the weight of years spent searching for answers hanging between them. They exchanged a brief nod, the kind that spoke volumes without needing words. "We've finally got a lead," Harris began, his voice steady but charged with emotion. The enhancement specialist managed to pull more detail from the photograph. The figure, it's someone local, someone who lived in the area back then. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. This was the most concrete information they'd had in years. "Who is it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Harris hesitated, as if weighing the impact of his words. "It's someone who was close to the case from the beginning. An old friend of your mother's." The revelation hit Sarah like a tidal wave. She struggled to process the implications, the memories of her mother's friends flashing through her mind. But why? Why would they have been there? And why didn't they come forward? Harris shook his head, uncertainty etched into his features. "I don't know yet, but it's a start. It's something we can investigate further." For the first time in years, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. The silence that had enveloped the case for so long was finally giving way to sound, to whispers of truth that echoed through the corridors of time. Over the following weeks, Sarah and Harris delved deeper into the past, their investigation taking on a new urgency. They combed through old records, revisited sites that had long since been forgotten, and interviewed anyone who might have known the mysterious figure in the photograph. Meanwhile, the community, once so engrossed in the mystery, had largely moved on. New families had settled in, and the town's collective memory of that fateful day had begun to fade. Yet for Sarah, each step closer to the truth brought a renewed sense of purpose. The years of silence had been a dark cloud over her life, a constant reminder of the unresolved pain and unanswered questions. But now, as the pieces of the puzzle slowly began to fit together, she could see the outlines of a truth that had been hidden just out of reach. One evening, as Sarah sat with Harris, poring over the latest findings, the phone rang. It was a call they had been waiting for. A contact from a local historian who had uncovered something in the town archives, a piece of evidence that could tie the mysterious figure to the disappearance. Sarah's hand shook as she ended the call and looked at Harris. "We have to go. Now." The long silence was shattering, and with each crack the light of truth shone brighter, illuminating the path that lay ahead. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in years, Sarah felt like they were truly on the brink of uncovering the answers that had eluded them for so long. Sarah and Harris raced down the winding roads of Blue Ridge, the setting sun casting long shadows across the landscape. The historian, a meticulous man named Arthur, had promised them something substantial. As they arrived at the small, dusty office of the local historical society, anticipation hung heavy in the air. Arthur greeted them with a nod, his eyes serious behind wire-rimmed glasses. "I found something that might interest you," he said, leading them to a table cluttered with yellowed documents and faded photographs. He pointed to a ledger, its pages brittle with age. "This," Arthur began, "is a record of land transactions in the area from over a decade ago. There's an entry here, property transferred under unusual circumstances to a name that matches the one in your photograph. It aligns with the timeline of the disappearance." Harris leaned in closer, his mind racing. "So, this person could have had access to the cabin where the hikers—" Arthur nodded. "Precisely. It's a link, albeit tenuous, but enough to warrant further investigation." Sarah felt a surge of determination. They were closer than ever to unraveling the mystery, each piece of evidence a stepping stone toward the truth. But there were still questions, still shadows lurking at the edges of their discovery. As they left the historian's office, Sarah's phone buzzed. It was Detective Monroe, a name she hadn't heard in years. His voice crackled over the line, steady and professional. "Sarah, it's good to hear your voice. I wanted you to know that we're reopening the case. There's new technology, genetic genealogy. We're going to apply it to the evidence we have." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "Genetic genealogy. How does that work?" Monroe explained, a hint of excitement in his voice. "It's a way to trace family trees and identify relatives through DNA. We'll be retesting items from the cabin, looking for anything that ties back to a living relative of the suspect." The potential of this breakthrough was overwhelming. For years the case had been cold, the trail frozen in time. But now, with science on their side, they had a tool that might finally melt away the mystery. Harris, having listened to the conversation, looked at Sarah with renewed hope. "This could be it, Sarah. This could be the key." As they drove back, the night enveloping them in its quiet embrace, Sarah felt a flicker of hope blossom into something more substantial. The silence that had haunted them for so long was being pierced, each revelation a chisel against the stone wall of the unknown. But even as hope surged, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were closing in on something bigger than they had ever imagined. The past was a tangled web, and they were only beginning to see its full expanse. In the quiet of the car, Harris broke the silence. "Do you think they'll find something?" Sarah nodded, her voice firm. "I do. And when they do, we'll finally have the answers we need." The journey was far from over, but with each new discovery, they were one step closer to uncovering the truth. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, Sarah felt like they were truly on the brink of a revelation that would change everything. As they drove on, the weight of the years began to lift, replaced by the promise of justice and the hope of closure for the mother and son who had vanished so long ago. As the dawn broke over the Blue Ridge, a new day brought with it the promise of answers long sought. At the precinct, Detective Monroe sat at his desk, eyes scanning the latest reports. The lab had expedited the analysis, understanding the urgency of the case that had haunted the community for over a decade. On his desk lay a file marked "Urgent Genetic Genealogy Results." Monroe's hands trembled slightly as he opened it, the weight of anticipation heavy in the room. Inside, the pages were filled with data, charts, and a single name that stood out, a name that was not previously on their radar. This was their new lead. He picked up the phone, dialing Sarah's number. "Sarah, it's Monroe. We have a match. Someone connected to the DNA found in the cabin. I need you to come down to the station." Sarah's heart raced as she listened. "I'll be there as soon as I can." As Sarah made her way to the precinct, her thoughts were a whirlwind. Could this be the breakthrough they needed? Could they finally be about to uncover the identity of the person who had upended their lives so many years ago? Monroe met her at the entrance, his expression a mix of excitement and caution. "The name we found. It's a relative of someone who lived in the area around the time of the disappearance. We need to track them down, see what they remember." Sarah nodded, her resolve strengthening. "Tell me everything." Inside the briefing room, Monroe laid out the details. The DNA match traces back to a man named Daniel Wheeler. He had a cabin not far from where the mother and son disappeared. He passed away years ago, but his niece still lives nearby. Sarah's mind raced. "The niece, does she know anything?" "We're arranging to talk to her. She might have kept in touch with him before he died, might know something about his activities back then, Monroe explained. As they prepared to visit the niece, a sense of urgency propelled them. Every second counted. The years of silence were slowly unraveling, and with each thread pulled, they were closer to the truth. Arriving at a modest house tucked away at the edge of town, they were greeted by Evelyn Wheeler, Daniel's niece. Her eyes held the weight of years, but there was a kindness in them that put Sarah at ease. After introductions and pleasantries, Monroe broached the topic. "Evelyn, we believe your uncle may have had some connection to a case we're investigating. Do you remember anything unusual about his life around 12 years ago?" Evelyn hesitated, her gaze distant as she searched her memories. "Uncle Daniel was a private man, but I remember he mentioned a woman and her son who used to pass by the cabin. He said they seemed troubled, like they were running from something." Sarah leaned forward, her heart pounding. "Did he ever say what happened to them?" Evelyn shook her head slowly. "No, but after they stopped coming around, he became more withdrawn. I always wondered if he knew more than he let on." Monroe exchanged a glance with Sarah, the pieces of the puzzle starting to fit together. "Evelyn, this is important. If you have anything of his, letters, journals, anything, it could help us." Evelyn nodded, standing up. "I'll see what I can find." As they waited, Sarah's mind was a storm of thoughts and emotions. They were closer than ever, but the truth still seemed just out of reach. What had truly happened in those woods? And how much had Daniel Wheeler really known? When Evelyn returned, she handed them a dusty old journal. "This was his. I hope it helps." With the journal in hand, a new chapter in their investigation had begun. The answers they sought could be hidden within its pages, waiting to finally bring light to the shadows of the past. As they left, the weight of the years felt lighter, buoyed by the hope that soon the truth would finally be revealed. The drive back to the precinct was silent, the journal lying between Sarah and Monroe like a fragile bridge to the past. The anticipation was palpable, each page a potential revelation waiting to be uncovered. As they arrived, the precinct buzzed with the usual hum of activity. But for Sarah and Monroe, the world outside faded, their focus solely on the dusty journal. In the confines of a small, dimly lit room, they opened it, the smell of aged paper mingling with anticipation. The entries were sparse, often cryptic, but one passage stood out. Daniel Wheeler had written about a hidden path leading deeper into the woods, a place where secrets were kept safe. It was where the woman and her son had often ventured, seeking solace or perhaps safety. Sarah's finger traced the faded ink, her mind racing. A hidden path. Monroe. This could be crucial. If there's something there, it might explain everything. Monroe nodded, his eyes fixed on the journal. "We need to search those woods again, but this time with fresh eyes." Just then, the door creaked open, and a young detective entered, his face a mixture of excitement and urgency. "Detective Monroe, Detective Miller, there's something you need to see. It's about the case." In the forensics lab, a new face greeted them, Dr. Emily Tran, a specialist in genetic genealogy. She gestured to a screen displaying complex DNA sequences, her expression serious yet hopeful. "We've been applying new forensic technology to old evidence," Dr. Tran began, her voice steady. "We ran the DNA from the cabin against our current databases, and we found a match, a familial match." Monroe and Sarah exchanged a glance, their hearts pounding. Dr. Tran continued, "The DNA partially matches a living relative, Evelyn Wheeler. It confirms that Daniel Wheeler had contact with the mother, possibly even the son. But there's more. We found traces of a third party, someone not related to them." Sarah's mind was a whirlwind. Could this third person be connected to their disappearance? Dr. Tran nodded. "It's possible. We believe this person may have been close to Daniel, someone he trusted, or someone who posed a threat." Monroe leaned forward, his voice low but intense. "We need to find this third person. If they're still out there, they could hold the key to everything." The room was silent, the weight of the revelation sinking in. A new path had emerged, one that could finally unravel the mystery of what happened to the mother and son. As the day slipped into evening, the team gathered their notes and prepared for the next step. Hope flickered amidst the uncertainty, a glimmer of light in the darkness that had shrouded the case for so long. The journey was far from over, but the end felt closer than ever. With renewed determination, they set out to uncover the truth, each step bringing them nearer to the answers that had eluded them for over a decade. As the team regrouped in the dimly lit conference room, the air was charged with a sense of impending discovery. Detective Monroe stood at the head of the table, the gravity of their mission plainly visible on his face. "We need to focus on two key aspects," Monroe began, his voice cutting through the murmur of anticipation. "First, we dive deep into Daniel Wheeler's connections, a comprehensive review of his acquaintances, colleagues, anyone who might have had a motive or opportunity. Second, we trace the lineage of this third DNA profile. If they're still out there, they might not even know they're connected to this case." Sarah Miller, ever the realist, added, "We should also consider the possibility that this third person could be a ghost, someone who vanished right after the incident, slipping through the cracks of our early investigations." Monroe nodded, his eyes scanning the room for resolve. "Exactly why we need fresh eyes on this. No stone unturned." As the meeting adjourned, the team split into groups, each assigned different facets of the investigation. Meanwhile, Dr. Tran continued her work, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she refined the genetic genealogy search, hoping to unearth more connections. In a separate corner of the precinct, Sarah sat down with a stack of old files, poring over them with a meticulous eye. Her mind drifted to the last known whereabouts of Daniel Wheeler and his mother, the Blue Ridge Mountains, a place now forever tinged with mystery and sorrow. Her thoughts were interrupted by a call from Monroe. "Sarah, you need to see this." Monroe's voice crackled through the phone, urgency lacing every word. Minutes later, Sarah joined Monroe in the tech lab. On a large screen, a map displayed a series of dots interconnected by lines, each representing known associates of Daniel Wheeler. But a new dot, highlighted in red, stood out. Monroe gestured to the screen. "This is Mark Ridley. He was known to frequent the same outdoor activities as Daniel, often hiking in the Blue Ridge area. We overlooked him before because he left town shortly after the disappearances, claiming it was for a new job opportunity." Sarah's mind raced. "And the DNA? Does it connect to him?" Monroe shook his head. "Not directly, but Dr. Tran found something interesting. Ridley's genetic profile shares several markers with the unknown third DNA, suggesting a potential familial relationship." The room fell silent, the implication sinking in. Could Mark Ridley have been the missing link they were searching for? And if so, what role did he play in the disappearance? As they delved deeper into Ridley's background, they discovered a pattern of behavior troublingly consistent with someone capable of such a crime. Previous run-ins with the law, a tendency for aggressive behavior, and a penchant for vanishing into obscurity. A sense of urgency gripped the team. Ridley was no longer just a name on a list. He was a person of interest, a potential suspect who might hold the key to unraveling the mystery. They needed to find him, and fast. As the night wore on, a plan began to take shape. A coordinated effort to track Ridley's current whereabouts and bring him in for questioning. The clock was ticking, and with each passing moment the stakes grew higher. The truth was within reach, but so was the danger that had shadowed this case for over a decade. As the team pressed forward, the pieces of the puzzle slowly began to align, and the image they formed was more chilling than anyone had anticipated. The air felt thick with anticipation as the team gathered around the conference table, the hum of the projector casting a dim glow over their faces. In the center, Monroe tapped a keyboard, bringing up a series of grainy surveillance images. "This," he said, pointing at a blurred figure entering a nondescript hardware store, "is Ridley, 2 days after the disappearance. The timestamp confirms his presence in the area." Sarah leaned forward, scrutinizing the image. "And the store records?" Monroe nodded. "Purchased several items that could easily be used to secure a cabin, chains, padlocks, tools. But here's where it gets interesting." He clicked to the next slide, revealing a receipt. "He used cash, but the clerk remembers him, said he was nervous, kept glancing over his shoulder." A murmur spread through the room. Sarah felt a flicker of hope. "Could the clerk identify him?" "We're working on a lineup," Monroe replied, But there's more. He gestured to Dr. Tran, who stood ready with a report in hand. Dr. Tran stepped forward, her expression grave yet determined. We ran additional tests on the items found in the cabin. The DNA we discovered, while not a direct match to Ridley, shares significant markers with his known family members. This suggests that the unknown DNA belongs to a close relative. Sarah's mind raced. A brother? A cousin? Possibly a brother, Dr. Tran confirmed. Our records show Ridley has a younger brother, Michael Ridley, who disappeared from public records around the same time Mark left town. An uneasy silence settled over the room, the implications clear. The brothers might have worked together, a sinister partnership hidden in the shadows of the Blue Ridge. Sarah's voice broke the tension. Do we have any leads on Michael's whereabouts? Monroe shook his head, a note of frustration in his voice. Not yet, but we're combing through old records, financial statements, anything that might give us a clue. The sense of urgency was palpable. Every second brought them closer to a resolution, but also closer to a potential confrontation with someone capable of such heinous acts. Sarah glanced at Monroe, her voice steady. We need to prepare for the possibility that both brothers are involved. This changes everything. Monroe nodded, determination etched into his features. We'll coordinate with local law enforcement. It's time to dig deeper into the Ridley family history, see if there are any other connections we've missed. As the team dispersed to their tasks, Sarah lingered, her thoughts swirling with possibilities. The cabin, the DNA, the disappearing brothers, each piece of the puzzle was slotting into place, but the picture it painted was dark and foreboding. Outside, the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, casting long shadows across the city. Somewhere out there, the Ridley brothers were hiding, and the truth was finally within reach. But the question remained, would they find the answers before the brothers disappeared once more into the wilderness? The team gathered in the dimly lit conference room, maps and documents strewn across the table, each piece a fragment of the intricate puzzle they were so close to completing. The urgency in the air was palpable, every breath laden with the weight of what was at stake. Sarah spoke first, her voice cutting through the silence. We need to focus on the financial records again. If Michael Ridley vanished from public view, there must be traces of his existence somewhere. Bank accounts, property purchases, anything. Monroe nodded, eyes scanning the sprawling evidence board. Let's also review any unusual land transactions in the area. The cabin where the hikers found the evidence. It might not be the only property they've used, Dr. Tran interjected, her tone analytical. I've been examining the genetic markers from the DNA again. There's a particular anomaly that suggests a hereditary illness. It's rare but can be traced through medical records. If Michael has received treatment, it might give us a location. The room fell into a focused hush as everyone absorbed this new angle. It was a lead, a sliver of hope in the murky depths of an investigation that had spanned over a decade. As the team worked tirelessly, poring over databases and archives, Sarah's phone buzzed, breaking the intense concentration. She glanced at the screen, a message from an old contact in law enforcement. Her heart skipped a beat. Monroe, listen to this, Sarah said, her voice barely containing the excitement. My contact just found a police report from 10 years ago, a disturbance call at a remote cabin. A man fitting Michael Ridley's description was seen leaving the area. But get this, the owner of the property is listed as an alias we know Ridley used. Monroe leaned in, eyes narrowing in thought. This could be it. If Michael was there, maybe he left something behind, something we missed. The team mobilized, energized by the prospect of finally uncovering the truth. With renewed determination, they sifted through the property records, their efforts culminating in a list of potential hideouts, each one a thread leading to the elusive brothers. As the hours ticked by, the pieces of the puzzle began to align. An old utility bill revealed a recent payment under one of Michael's known aliases. The location, a remote cabin nestled deep within the Blue Ridge Mountains, far from prying eyes. Sarah's heart thudded in her chest, a mixture of anticipation and dread. This could be the break we need. We have to move fast before they realize we're closing in. Monroe stood, his resolve unshakable, Let's coordinate with the local authorities and set up surveillance. We need to approach this carefully. If the Ridley brothers are there, we can't afford to let them slip away again." As the team prepared to take action, the gravity of the moment settled over them. They were on the brink of unmasking a hidden truth, a truth that had eluded them for years. The day of reckoning was at hand, and soon the world would know the real story of what happened in the shadows of the Blue Ridge. But as they moved forward, a chilling question lingered in their minds. What other secrets were the Ridley brothers hiding, and were they prepared for what they might find? The cabin loomed in the distance, its silhouette barely visible through the thick trees that surrounded it like a fortress. The team, clad in unassuming gear, worked silently with local authorities, positioning themselves strategically to ensure no one could escape their watchful eyes. As dawn's first light crept over the horizon, casting an eerie glow on the scene, the tension was palpable. For years, the Ridley brothers had been a spectre, haunting the memories of those who had lost loved ones. But today, those ghosts might finally be laid to rest. A soft crackle came through the radio. "All units in position, awaiting your signal, Monroe." Monroe nodded, though no one could see him. The plan was simple: approach, secure, and interrogate. But the weight of the moment was anything but. He took a deep breath, then gave the go-ahead. The team moved with precision, their footsteps as silent as the mist that curled around the cabin. As they reached the porch, the air was thick with unspoken dread. Sarah's voice was a whisper, barely audible. "Do you think they're inside?" Monroe glanced at her, his eyes hard with determination. "We'll find out soon enough." With a nod, he signaled the entry team. The door, weathered and worn, creaked open with a sound that seemed to echo across the mountains. Inside, the cabin was a time capsule from years past. Dust lay thick on every surface, but it was the signs of recent habitation that caught their attention. A newspaper from 3 days ago, a half-eaten meal on the table, and a pair of muddy boots by the door. But it was the figure sitting calmly in the corner that made Monroe's heart skip a beat. The man looked up, his face a mask of indifference. It was Michael Ridley, but not as they had imagined. Here, in the flesh, he seemed almost ordinary. His expression gave nothing away, yet his eyes held a flicker of something. Defiance or resignation, it was hard to tell. "Michael Ridley," Monroe's voice was firm, "you're under arrest for the disappearance of Elizabeth and Aaron Thompson." Michael's lips curled into a smile, one that never reached his eyes. "Took you long enough," he said, his tone mocking. As they cuffed him, Monroe's mind raced. This was the man who had eluded them for years, a killer hiding in plain sight. The realization was both a victory and a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind the most mundane facades. As they let him out, Sarah noticed something on the table, a journal, its pages filled with Michael's meticulous handwriting. She picked it up, feeling its weight, both literal and metaphorical. Outside, the morning sun bathed the world in light, as if erasing the night's shadows. But the questions remained. Who was Michael Ridley truly, and why had he chosen this path? As the team prepared to delve into the journal's secrets, one thing was certain. The mask had been lifted, but the full story, his motives, his accomplices, was yet to be revealed. And so the stage was set for the final act, where the truth would emerge, no matter how painful or unexpected. The drive back to the precinct was eerily silent. Michael sat in the back seat, his eyes fixed on the passing landscape, indifferent to the weight of his fate. Monroe, gripping the wheel, felt the gravity of the moment. The man they had sought for over a decade was finally within their grasp, but the hardest part was yet to come. Inside the interrogation room, the air was thick with anticipation. Michael sat across the table, his posture relaxed, almost insolent. Monroe and Sarah stood on the other side, the journal lying between them like a bridge to the truth. "Michael," Monroe began, his voice steady, "we know you were involved in the disappearance of Elizabeth and Aaron Thompson. The journal you left behind, it's your story, isn't it?" Michael leaned back, a faint smirk playing on his lips. "It's just words," he replied, his tone casual. "But I suppose they're the ones you've been waiting for." Sarah opened the journal, flipping through pages filled with confessions masquerading as reflections. There were entries detailing the day Elizabeth and Aaron vanished, notes about the cabin, and an unsettling account of how he had watched them, learned their routines, and planned their abduction. "Why, Michael?" Sarah asked, her voice laced with a mix of disbelief and curiosity. "Why did you do it?" His eyes flicked up, meeting hers with a chilling calmness. "Because I could," he said simply. "Because no one ever really sees what's right in front of them. People like you, you're always looking for monsters. But sometimes the monster is just a shadow." The confession was both infuriating and revealing. Michael Ridley had hidden in plain sight, relying on the very ordinariness of his existence to cloak his sinister deeds. As the interrogation continued, he recounted how he had manipulated those around him, leveraging their trust and underestimations. With every word, the puzzle pieces fell into place. How he had lived unnoticed, the cold detachment with which he had orchestrated the disappearance, and the meticulous manner in which he had documented it all, as if daring someone to find him. The trial that followed was swift, fueled by the journal's damning evidence and Michael's own admissions. The courtroom was packed with people whose lives had been touched by Elizabeth and Aaron, their presence a testament to the community's shared grief and hope for justice. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, a collective sigh of relief swept through the room. Justice, long delayed, had finally been served. Yet as Michael was led away, the aftermath rippled through the community. For the Thompson family, closure came at a heavy price. The years of uncertainty and anguish had left scars that time could not erase, but there was solace in the truth, a chance to finally lay Elizabeth and Aaron to rest with dignity. In the Blue Ridge community, Michael's arrest was both a cautionary tale and a call to vigilance. The realization that a trusted neighbor had harbored such darkness prompted a renewed commitment to watchfulness and compassion, ensuring that no one slipped through the cracks again. As Monroe and Sarah stood atop the ridge where the journey had begun, they reflected on the thin line between the seen and unseen, the known and unknown. Justice had been served, but the memory of Elizabeth and Aaron would linger, a poignant reminder of the fragility and resilience of life. And so, with the sun setting behind the mountains, they turned away, carrying with them the weight of truth and the hope that, in remembering, they could prevent such shadows from falling again.